Hi, I'm Catherine Nelson, Vice President of Leadership at Franklin Covey. I also served as one of the chief product architects in the development of both 7 Habits Signature and 7 Habits Foundations. So I'm delighted to be with you today to review each of the 7 habits of highly effective people as they relate to the new 7 Habits Foundations program. Now, if I were to ask you what you would like to achieve in your life, what would you say? For most people, the things that are most important relate to our families, our friends, our work, and our other life goals. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People Foundations work session is all about how to become more effective and achieve what you really want in your work and personal life. Today, I'll be introducing the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from start to finish, and in a way that will help you understand how each habit builds upon the other and how they work together to help you achieve what you want most in your life. The Foundations work session has been designed in a way that focuses on long-term application, not just a quick fix. When you choose to consistently live the 7 habits, you will see a measurable change in your behavior over time. Dr. Stephen R. Covey was the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Before Dr. Covey passed away in 2012, he stated many times that the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People were more relevant today than ever. Today, the 7 habits are 25 years young. We all know it's harder to be effective today than it's ever really been. So ultimately, the test of our success in life is our ability to achieve the things that are most important to us, things that are aligned with timeless principles of human effectiveness. In order to do that, we first need to lead and manage ourselves, what we call the private victory. Once we do that, then we can move forward toward achieving the public victory, working well with others. As we address the timeless principles of effectiveness that Dr. Covey shared with the world, you will learn the timely practices that make up the new 7 Habits Foundations. From the 20 practices in the 7 Habits Signature 4.0 work session, we've chosen 14 to focus on in the Foundations work session, while weaving the language of the other 6 practices throughout. These practices are also clearly identified at the beginning of each habit. And like paradigms, we call out the common or less effective practices for each habit. The principles of effectiveness that apply are identified at the beginning of each habit. So, what is our promise to you after attending the 7 Habits Foundations work session? Our promise to you is that when you live the 7 habits, you'll become measurably more effective in your work and personal life. Dr. Covey spent a lifetime studying effectiveness, and he concentrated his studies into the 7 habits of highly effective people. Now, Dr. Covey maintained that he did not invent the 7 habits, rather he discovered them over the wisdom of his lifetime. So let's look at the first of 2 foundational concepts, moving from dependence to interdependence. People who are effective move from dependence to interdependence. They grow and mature over time. We start out our lives being dependent on others. That's natural as a baby or a young child. But in order to become healthy, effective adults, we must move out of dependence and into independence, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially, and in many other ways. We cannot be effective unless we are able to be independent. But independence is not the ultimate goal of healthy living. Effective people also have healthy, fulfilling relationships with other people. We call this interdependence. This is where we work and play well with others. We're able to influence others and to be influenced by them. Interdependence is the ultimate state of human living. So we have a tool or a framework we use to see how the 7 habits help you grow from dependence to independence and from independence to interdependence. We call it the maturity continuum. The order of the habits is important. You can't skip a habit or do the latter habits first. They build on each other. Habit 1 is be proactive. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Habit 3, put first things first. When you practice these first 3 habits, you lead yourself. You're in control of yourself and you take responsibility for your choices. You become independent. This is the private victory. Habits 4, 5, and 6 are about working effectively with others. Habit 4 is think win-win. Habit 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Habit 6 is synergize. Now, when you live these habits, you become interdependent, what we call the public victory. Finally, habit 7, sharpen the saw. This habit forms a ring around the other habits. Why? Because it's the habit that holds the other habits together. Habit 7 is the habit of renewal. Now, sometimes the easiest way to understand the power of the maturity continuum is to see what the opposite looks like. And we call this the immaturity continuum. This is when I start from a place of total dysfunction. That first habit is to be the victim. I blame everything and everybody else for what happens to me. Second, I begin with nothing in mind, no goals or sense of purpose or meaning. Third, I put urgent things first, not first things first. I react to every urgency and emergency with no sense of priority. I'm a drama queen. And ultimately, I end up with a private failure, not a private victory. I can't trust myself to get the most important things done, and neither can anyone else. I am now dependent. Habit 4 of the immaturity continuum is where I think win-lose, or I think lose-win. I see everything as a competition or as a fight. In order to have influence, I move to the opposite of habit 5. Seek first to be understood, then to be understood again. I don't listen to anyone, and I talk incessantly. I explain why I am right to anyone who will listen. The opposite of habit 6 is to minimize everything. At this point, I'm completely codependent. I need you to validate and agree with me. And I never arrive at the peace of habit 7. I'm in a state of perpetual burnout. Now, did you notice how I said I? Do you relate to any of these anti-habits? I've made all of these mistakes. We all have. But here's the power of the 7 habits, and that is that we now have a common language to describe what we're doing and a framework for changing those bad habits into truly effective ones. It can be hard to change our habits, but changing our habits gets easier if we first change our paradigms. This is the second foundational concept of the 7 habits. We use a model that we call the see, do, get model to show how we can change our behavior and learn more effective habits. Let's see how this works. A paradigm is how we see and understand the world, a mental map. How I see the world, my paradigm, affects what I do. This is the do part of the cycle. We call these practices, your behaviors and habits. What you do determines the results you get. Now, since effective habits are based on effective paradigms, when your habits are effective, you'll get the results you want over and over again. Let me give you an example. Let's just say that you were raised with a paradigm, the way that you see the world, and that is that education is key to getting ahead in life. If you truly believe and live that paradigm, what will you do? Well, first, you'll study hard. You'll get an education, whether it's high school or technology school or college or graduate school, whatever it takes for you to have the career that you envision for yourself. Now, the result, most likely, is that you'll be well qualified in whatever field you choose, and that could lead to a fulfilling and successful career. So this outcome reinforces to you the importance of getting an education. Now, that's not to say that there won't be pitfalls or challenges along the way, but this is the essence of the see, do, get cycle. How you see the world largely determines what you do, which determines the results you get, and that impacts the way that you see the world. Let's move to habit 1. Habit 1, be proactive, is the habit of personal responsibility. It allows you to have more control over your life and is the first step of the private victory, learning to lead yourself and to move from dependence to independence. The effective paradigm of habit 1 is, I am responsible for my happiness. Now, while we may have little choice over our circumstances, we can choose how we respond to them. Habit 1 has 3 key practices. The first is to pause before you respond. To be effective means that we have to create space between stimulus, what's happened to us, and our response to that stimulus. Let's watch a video that shows what I mean.
Monday morning, and it's raining. A gray, melancholy day. On a day like this, maybe we can be excused for feeling gray and melancholy ourselves. We get into a mood, and the whole day seems to go badly. Don't you feel better when the weather outside is great? But what if you could carry your own weather within you? What about the social world we live in? Don't you feel better when you're treated better? That's being reactive to what we could call the social weather, the social culture. When you carry your weather with you, you can choose to be consistent regardless of how people treat you. That's what it means to be proactive. Being reactive is the opposite of being proactive, not taking responsibility for our own life. You always see yourself as a victim of the weather, of your moods, of someone who has it in for you. Habit 1 is based on the principle that your life is the result of your own decisions, not your conditions, not what's happening around you. That's why habit 1 is so foundational, so basic. Unless you practice habit 1, you can never practice the other habits of highly effective people. Years ago, I was doing research in a library in Hawaii. While thumbing through a book, I came across an idea that changed my whole outlook. The author said something like this: between what happens to us, that is the stimulus, and our response is a space. In that space lies our power and our freedom to choose our response. And in those choices lie our growth and our happiness. This insight sunk deep into my heart. Even in the midst of challenging circumstances, we have this exhilarating power to choose how we will respond. For instance, the great Viktor Frankl, the Jewish Austrian psychiatrist imprisoned in the death camps of Nazi Germany during World War II, experienced unbelievable indignities and tortures. He was raised to believe that you are basically a product of your childhood. But while he was in the death camp, he began to observe some very interesting things. Different people reacted differently to the same circumstances. He himself experienced terrible things. Some of his own loved ones were killed. One day they stripped him, put him under lights, and performed experiments upon his body. At that lowest possible point, he discovered what he called the last human freedom, the power to choose your own response to any condition, to anything that happens to you. During his darkest moments, Frankl would visualize himself lecturing to his students in Austria following his release. He pictured himself teaching them about the very experiences he was having then. He came to believe that the most basic human capability of all is that between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. Frankl later determined the thing that enabled survival in the death camps was not necessarily intelligence or survival skills, but a sense of purpose, a contribution yet to be made. This became the basis for his brilliant autobiography, Man's Search for Meaning. It's not what people do to us that hurts us. It's our chosen response to what they do that hurts us. As Gandhi put it, they cannot take away our self-respect if we do not give it to them. We must simply never build our emotional life around the weaknesses of other people. Otherwise, we give them permission to continue to mess up our lives. We give our future away. Several years ago, I was making a presentation on this subject of proactivity and a woman stood up in the middle of my speech and started to give a speech on her own, spontaneously. She was filled with explosive learning and excitement. You could see in her eyes, her gestures, her body language. And then she sensed the inappropriateness of what she was doing. She sat back down. I could hardly wait until the break to talk to her. "What happened to you?" I asked. She shared her story. She said, "I'm the full-time nurse to an extremely miserable man. He doesn't even acknowledge me, let alone show me any form of appreciation." She went on to explain that this elderly man, entrusted to her care, was absolutely miserable and took his misery out on her. She was becoming more and more depressed and hated the thought of going to work each day and facing this irritable man. All of the other nurses felt the same way. They talked even of his demise, wished for it, hoped for it, while they were taking care of him. Then she said something to me. "For you to stand up there and suggest that I am choosing to be miserable was almost too much. But then, listening to you, I suddenly realized that I do choose to be miserable. Before, I believed I didn't choose it. He made me. But then I realized how dependent I am. I'd given my power over myself to him and his miserable behavior." "As I thought about what you were saying," she said, "I realized I had the power to choose and felt like I had been let out of prison. That's why I stood up. I could not contain myself. I just can't tell you what that means. This feeling of freedom is almost overwhelming. We have the power and the freedom to choose, to create our own weather each day. As Fulton J. Sheen once said, each of us makes his own weather, determines the color of the skies in the emotional universe which he inhabits."
So, you can see how choosing how you respond can make all the difference, sometimes in very big ways. This simple concept of creating space between a stimulus and a response is at the heart of every habit. Effectiveness means creating space, often in challenging and difficult situations. It means you slow down and identify the space that helps you to make better choices. The second practice of habit 1 is to use proactive language. When you use proactive language, you don't blame or accuse others, which is the common practice. You take responsibility. When you are effective, you use words and phrases like, "I can," "I get to," "I choose to," "I want to," "I'm sorry," "There's got to be a way," rather than, "I can't help it, it's not my fault, look at what you made me do." Using proactive language is tremendously empowering. A few simple words can change how you see a situation, and they can help you get a completely different result. Proactive language will change your mood as well as your outcomes. The third practice of habit 1 is to focus on your circle of influence. So instead of wasting your time and energy on things you can't control, things in what we call your circle of concern, you focus on those things you can do something about. We call that your circle of influence. The more often you focus on things you can do something about, the bigger your circle of influence becomes. Let's move to habit 2. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind, is the habit of personal vision. Now, many times we feel that we can't really predict how life will turn out, so we're just going to go wherever life takes us. And that's a pretty common paradigm. Now, habit 2 isn't about never being spontaneous or being open to what life brings, but it is about thinking deeply about who and what you want to be and what you want your life to stand for. In habit 2, we focus on one highly effective practice, and that is to create and live by a personal mission statement. Habit 2 is based on the idea that everything we do is created twice. To do everything with an end in mind means to define the results you want for something before you act. It's like drawing a blueprint before you build. Taking time in the first creation, imagining where you'd like to end up or what outcome you'd like to get, is effective in every aspect of your life, including day-to-day tasks, as well as your life as a whole. A personal mission statement is like a written constitution for your life. It allows you to shape your own future instead of letting it be shaped by other people or circumstances. Effective people spend time deeply reflecting on their most important roles, their long-term goals, and how they want to be remembered at the end of their lives. We guide participants in the 7 Habits Foundation's work session through these steps of self-reflection. And each person leaves with a draft of their personal mission statement so they can begin living their lives every day with the end in mind. Habit 3 is put first things first. It's the habit of personal management. Being highly effective means spending time on what's most important, not on what's most urgent at that moment. Let's look at this concept through the lens of the time matrix. Quadrant 1 of the time matrix includes those things that are both urgent and important. It's the quadrant of necessity: crises, pressing problems, and last-minute deadlines. Although the activities in Quadrant 1 are important, if you spend too much time here, you really run the risk of burning out. Quadrant 3 is the quadrant of distraction. These are things that are urgent but not important. Needless interruptions, irrelevant meetings, and unimportant tasks, some phone calls, texts, social media, some email, even some conversations in the hallway. These aren't necessarily bad, but some of them are simply deceptive. Spending excessive time in Quadrant 3 can kill productivity and morale, personally and professionally. Quadrant 4 is neither urgent nor important. It's the quadrant of waste. Too many of us move to Quadrant 4 with the hope that we can get some of our energy back. But because this is the quadrant of waste, we don't get the true rest, relaxation, or rejuvenation that comes from spending time in Quadrant 2, the quadrant of effectiveness. Sometimes what begins as a Quadrant 2 activity becomes excessive, and then we end up in Quadrant 4. You will know when you've dropped into Quadrant 4 if you have feelings of regret or guilt. Those feelings don't live in Quadrant 2. So let's talk about Quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is the quadrant of effectiveness. It's where you do things that are important, but not necessarily urgent. And it includes planning, preparation, relationship building, learning, renewal. In Quadrant 2, you accomplish the things that really matter, the activities that move you closer to the vision that you created in Habit 2. The first highly effective practice of Habit 3 is to focus on your highest priorities, not on crises and other people's agendas. The second effective practice in Habit 3 is to plan every week. Effective people make sure they carve out time for things that are most important and then follow through with them, even when other less important things compete for time and attention. So let's begin the first practice by watching a Covey classic, Big Rocks. Now, this video was made in 1994, but it is still pertinent today as we all attempt to determine and execute our highest priorities. As you watch, think about how you can make time for the most important things in your life.
Your name is?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. You have a work life?
I do.
Family life as well?
Mm-hmm.
Children?
Not yet.
Not yet. What's the nature of your work assignment?
I direct an international firm.
An international firm?
Mm-hmm.
So you really are interfacing with all kinds of people in the firm and outside the firm.
That's right.
You want a rich personal life and a rich family life. Do you ever feel like you get bogged down in the thick of thin things?
Yes.
Well, that might be analogous to all these little, small things that tend to fill our life, and that just little by little, they just accumulate. Now, your job, you can't go above this, is to get all those large rocks in the jar. Good luck. What's that one called?
Q2, planning, preparation.
Right. Planning, preparation, prevention, and empowerment. Mm-hmm. Okay, the next rock she's putting in there is called relationships and family. You didn't look at that third rock you put in there. That's employment, some key employment issue, and then you put major projects here. I can't get it above there.
I haven't worked it yet.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. That's called service, community, church. Do you ever feel like this?
Yes.
How many feel like this? By moving the little things around, you might squeeze in one more of those big major things. It's almost. Wow, that is good. You know, if it doesn't fit, force it. Here's something that's called urgent and important. It's a quadrant 1 thing that is blindsiding you, that it's your biggest client, that if you don't get back to that client now, you've given up your vacation.
No.
And you have no special block of time just for yourself. I'll tell you what you can do if you want to.
What's that?
You can take a whole different approach. You have a totally fresh bowl. You can work out of a different paradigm altogether.
Well, then I'd rather put these in the bottom and then pour the little pebbles on top.
Employment.
Big opportunity.
Big opportunity.
Important and urgent. Block of time. Those young children keep looking at me. Glad my husband's not here. Now I dump these in there.
Okay? That's great.
The time matrix tool I shared earlier is one of the best ways to help you determine what matters most in your life. To ensure you get your important things done and eliminate the unimportant, you need to schedule them first. They are the big rocks. If you want to be effective, to lead yourself, you will plan every week. This doesn't just mean writing things on a calendar or on a sticky note somewhere. Let me explain. There are 3 steps to weekly planning. First, you connect with your mission. Habit 3 really is the action you take to live your personal mission. It's how you ensure the things that are important to you stay front and center. Second, you now schedule your big rocks. These are your quadrant 2 things. We have provided a Big Rocks tool to help guide you. It's in the participant kit and on the 7 Habits app. Effective people ask themselves the Big Rocks question. What are the 1 or 2 most important things I can do in this role this week? Once you've identified those most important things, you put them in your calendar. It's like making an appointment with yourself. Doing this significantly increases the chances that you will accomplish those vital quadrant 2 activities. So by scheduling the big rocks, you're putting first things first. Now, the third step to weekly planning is to organize everything else around your big rocks. Remember the visual around the big rocks? We need to be ready and willing to let go of some of the quadrant 3 gravel, those little rocks that feel urgent but are really not important. We're now moving from the private victory, habits 1, 2, and 3, I can lead myself, to the public victory, habits 4, 5, and 6, I can work well with other people. The real impact of achieving the private victory is that people can trust you. You're not a slave to your moods or the weather or what other people say or do. You can take control of your life and be depended upon to do what you say you'll do. This foundation of trust is essential to being successful in the public victory. So let's start the first habit in the public victory, habit 4, think win-win. This is the habit of mutual benefit. Now, when you're effective, you look for ways where everyone can win. More commonly, people think that if you win, I lose, and vice versa. Most of us are heavily scripted in a paradigm of scarcity. The more you get, the less there is for me. But you can hold a different, more effective paradigm, which is that there's more than enough for everyone. Now, there are 3 highly effective practices when you think win-win. First, you build the emotional bank account with others. Second, you have an abundance mentality. And third, you consider other people's wins as well as your own. So let's begin with the emotional bank account. Now, the emotional bank account is the metaphor we use in the 7 habits to represent the amount of trust that exists in a relationship. When we show kindness, courtesy, respect, when we give this to others, we make a deposit in their emotional bank account. When we keep promises, we make a deposit. Strong relationships require many frequent deposits, even if they are small deposits. Win-win isn't always the common way of thinking. More often, people think win-lose, lose-win, or sometimes even lose-lose. The effective mindset is to think win-win. You approach relationships with the attitude of, there's enough for everyone. We can all win. Now, when we think win-win, we think into the long term. You think about the deposits and the withdrawals that you might make in a relationship over time. What is the end in mind of that relationship? Let me give you an example. In a sporting event, the goal is to win, right? I know that I want my team to win. Now, most of us have been scripted in win-lose when it comes to sports, to compete. And competition like that is not bad in and of itself. There is a very appropriate time and place for it, and it's appropriate in a sporting event. But life is not a sporting event. And too often, focusing on win-lose or lose-win, that mentality is detrimental, particularly when relationships matter. Thinking win-win means I respect you and I respect myself. I want you to win, but not at my expense. And I want to win, but not at your expense. I may not always get win-win, but I can approach every interaction thinking win-win. The second highly effective practice of habit 4, think win-win, is to have an abundance mentality. Think about whether you come from a scarcity or an abundance mentality as I ask you these questions. First of all, how do you feel when others close to you succeed at something that you wanted to succeed at? Do you feel diminished, or do you feel genuinely happy for them? Do you compare yourself to others to find a sense of self-worth? Thinking win-win requires a shift from comparison and competition to abundance and cooperation. It's a paradigm of there's plenty out there for everyone and more to spare. Scarcity thinking comes from fear and insecurity. When I work from a scarcity mentality, I'm afraid of being small or less than. Amazingly, the more abundant you are, the bigger you seem. The third highly effective practice in habit 4 is to consider other people's wins as well as your own. And this means that you take time to identify what your wins are, what the other person's wins are, before you solve a problem or come to an agreement. Now, this takes both courage, the ability to ask for what you want, and consideration, the ability to care about what the other person wants. This ties right back to the concept of the emotional bank account. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood, is the habit of empathic communication. It's the skill of the public victory. Habit 5 is about influence. Rather than the common practice of needing to make sure other people understand your point of view, effective people hold the paradigm that they have more influence when they listen first, when they listen with the intent to understand. The first practice is to practice empathic listening. That is, to listen to understand and not to reply. We often want to respond to a person's comments or story by probing and evaluating and advising or interpreting them. Now, we call this autobiographical listening. That means that this comes from your story and not their story. Your intent is to help or to show the other person what to do. But interestingly, it rarely gets you the influence and the relationships that you want. On the other hand, empathic listening means that you step outside of your story, your own autobiography, and allow the other person to express how they feel until they feel understood. The intent is to understand, not to reply. And the skill is to simply reflect back what they're saying and feeling in your own words. Watch what happens when a mother listens empathically to her son.
Too often, we listen to others with the intent to reply. Empathic listening is an altogether different way of being. It is listening with the intent to understand, with the intent to get to the bottom of an issue. It's one of the most important habits any leader can practice. It's the key to effective results in interpersonal relationships, in teams, and in organizations. When we listen empathically, we try to understand the other's point of view with no judgment, with no preconceived end in mind. We simply seek to understand. We temporarily suspend our view long enough to see the world through their eyes. Only people who are secure enough with themselves, those with a firm grasp of the private victory, have the capacity to listen in this way. It's important to note that empathic listening is not about agreeing or disagreeing. It's not about solving or fixing or figuring someone out. It's simply about understanding another's point of view and feelings. Watch what happens when you listen with the sole intent to understand.
Doing your homework?
What's the point? I'll never use it.
Sounds like you're frustrated.
I'm just sick of school. It's pointless. I mean, look at Joe. He dropped out of school, has a full-time job, he has his own car, his own apartment, and I'm stuck here trying to decipher some ancient Greek play no one even cares about.
So you think Joe's got it better?
I mean, Joe's always bragging about how much better his life is now that he doesn't have to worry about teachers bossing him around or everyone telling him what to do.
Joe's got a lot of freedom.
Yeah, I mean, at least he's doing something. He has to work late nights so he can't hang out with us as much or go to the games, but at least he's going somewhere.
So he's missing out on a lot, but at least he's moving forward.
I just can't get this stuff.
Dad's gonna kill me. You won't tell him, will you?
You're worried about what Dad'll think?
It's just he always talks about how education is important and how he expects me to go to college, but how can I do that if I can't do this?
So You're worried that if you don't understand this, then you won't get it in college either.
I know I can't. They gave me a reading test, right? On the reading test, I scored on the 9th grade level, Mom. The 9th grade. I'm a senior.
And that worried you.
No matter what I do, I just don't get it. And I know Dad will know that I'm flunking out. I don't want to quit school, but I don't know any way out.
You don't want to drop out of school, and you don't want to disappoint Dad.
Right. So what will I do?
I'm not sure. But I'm sure we can figure things out.
All you need to do is reflect what they feel and say in your own words. And because it's so simple, we often underestimate its power. If you don't believe me, just try it tonight with someone important to you. Just simply reflect what they feel and say in your own words. Remember now, listen with the intent to understand, not to reply. It's the key to opening up people's hearts and getting to the real issue.
What an amazing difference. She got to the real issue, but it took maturity and patience to get there. Now, often the person speaking doesn't even know the real issue until you give him or her the psychological air to talk it out without inserting your analyses and judgments, interpretations, and all of your probing questions. We can use empathic listening in all kinds of situations and with all kinds of people, at work or at home. The most important thing with empathic listening is not the technique, it's the intent. Real empathic listening comes from the desire to truly understand the other person, to pay the price to listen, and to be influenced before you try to influence. Once the person you're talking to feels understood, you can then take a turn to express your thoughts. And this takes us to the second practice of Habit 5, which is to respectfully seek to be understood. Now, while many of us really need to practice listening empathically, some of us find it difficult to state our point of view respectfully with both courage and consideration. The key here is to take responsibility for your own feelings, for your own wants and desires, and then to respectfully share your opinion. Now, this also requires intent and skill. The intent is to be understood effectively. The skill is to use I messages. Habit 5 really comes together when you practice the full circle of empathic communication. Someone shares a situation they feel very strongly about and speaks until they feel understood. Then you respond empathically until understanding is reached, and then you share your point of view with respect. So how does empathic listening apply today when most of us do a great deal of our communication by phone or text or email or social media? In my experience, Habit 5 applies even more in the digital world. The principles of empathic listening apply across all types of communication. In fact, empathic listening is particularly helpful for nonverbal communication when we can't see body language or we can't hear someone's inflection or tone. You can always reflect back feelings and words, whether it's an email or a text, whether you're on a phone call, and that way you can ensure understanding. As we finish out Habit 5, watch this funny take on empathic listening and watch for the power of listening with empathy.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
This video always gets a laugh. Most people have been on one side or the other of this conversation. Remember, habit 5 is about having influence. No matter how much the male character thought he knew the female's problem, he could not have influence until she felt understood. Try today, either at work or at home, and see what happens. Habit 6, synergize, is the habit of mutual cooperation. It's what you get when you hold the attitude of habit 4 and practice the skill of habit 5. A common paradigm is that compromise is the very best you can do when working with others. Now, when people are highly effective, they don't settle for compromise, where everyone gives up something. In fact, compromise is the highest form of lose-lose. Effective people say, let's come up with a better way together. The first practice of habit 6 is value differences. Now, when you're highly effective, you welcome and value having a variety of perspectives on a problem or an opportunity, especially when it's difficult. Sometimes the most common differences that are devalued aren't the ethnic differences or gender differences or religious or cultural differences. They're actually small things, like one person being very organized and the other person being, well, not very organized at all. This is the key. Learn to value the differences that people bring to the table and build on strengths. I have a colleague, Sean Covey, who's Stephen R. Covey's son, and he will often say, hey, you see it differently. I need to listen to you. I'm always amazed at his humility and abundance as he values the different viewpoints we all bring. When you are effective, you use all the habits to synergize in order to seek out what we call the third alternative. This means that you work with others to look for creative solutions to problems and opportunities. You must be willing. It takes some measure of character and maturity, the private victory, habits 1, 2, and 3, the mindset of win-win, habit 4, and the ability to communicate effectively, habit 5, to create a third alternative. Many so-called intractable problems can be solved when two people focus on all the principles of effectiveness. They put away egos and focus on creating something much better than either one of them had imagined was possible. Synergy is the capstone of the public victory and results in the third alternative, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, where 1 + 1 = 3 or 10 or 100 or even 1,000. Let's look at one of my favorite new videos in 7 Habits Foundations. As you watch it, look for evidence of all the other habits as this community creates real synergy.
Me llamo Juan Manuel Chávez, más conocido como Baby. Tengo 19 años y toco el cello. Este cello está hecho de una lata de aceite y las clavijas son de una vieja cuchara para golpear la carne y para hacer el ñoquis. Y suena así.
Cateura es vista como un lugar donde se tira toda la basura, donde hay un mal olor, donde hay mucha suciedad.
La familia que acá vive recicla todo lo que hay en la basura y se vende.
Yo llegué a Cateura para trabajar en un proyecto de reciclado de basura. Los recicladores se dieron cuenta que yo también era músico. Hizo surgir un deseo en estas personas que yo enseñe música a sus hijos. Una comunidad como Cateura no es un lugar para tener un violín. De hecho, un violín cuesta más que su casa. Fue la idea de Cola de hacer instrumentos con los materiales que estuviesen a mano. El material que más hay en Cateura es la basura.
Dos maderas lindas para servir para mi alma de cello y contrabajo y violín. El primer violín era un volador de fideo de aluminio y el mango tenía tacuara. Y poner la cuerda a Fabio y empieza a tocar.
Y eso fue un continuo probar y probar y probar. Nunca nos hubiésemos imaginado que ese primer violín sería el inicio de todo un proceso que se transformó luego en una orquesta. 1, 2, 3 y... Fue muy importante la participación de varias personas, cada una desde su cualidad, de su visión, desde su experiencia, desde sus habilidades. Sin ese tipo de aportes, esta orquesta no sería lo que es hoy.
La música para mí significa todo. Sin la música estaría por ahí.
Cuando ya escucho el sonido del violín, siento como mariposa en el estómago, así una sensación que no sé cómo voy a explicar.
El director me dijo para poder enseñarle a algunos niños en Cateura, no tengo otra opción que ayudarle a esta comunidad, porque es algo que con el tiempo puede cambiar muchas cosas.
Hoy en día hay 160 niños que están aprendiendo música.
Está cambiando totalmente a la comunidad y a la gente, pero para bien, muy positivo. Ellos sienten de que tienen el apoyo total de papá y mamá.
Creo que mis padres se sacrifican por mí y por mi hermana, porque ellos quieren que nosotros salgamos adelante y hacer las cosas que ellos no pudieron hacer cuando eran más chicos.
Yo cuando voy a Cateura, la gente dice, ¿te vas a Cateura donde está la basura? Y yo le digo, no, me voy a Cateura donde está la gente, donde están los niños que quieren aprender. La gente se da cuenta que no tenemos que tirar la basura muy fácilmente y no tenemos que desechar a las personas muy fácilmente.
Habit 7, sharpen the saw, is the habit of daily self-renewal. Many of us find it difficult to make time every day to take care of ourselves. That's a pretty common paradigm. Now, when you're effective, you see the world differently and you take time every day to renew, to take care of yourself. Habit 7 is about how you can take care of your most important asset, you, so that you can practice the other 6 habits. The title of Habit 7, Sharpen the Saw, refers to the analogy of trying to cut a log with a saw that's dull, instead of taking the time to sharpen it. It takes longer, and it's frustrating and exhausting. The practice for habit 7 is to achieve the daily private victory. You achieve the daily private victory by taking care of yourself every day in a routine that keeps you healthy in body, mind, heart, and spirit. We call these the 4 dimensions. The daily private victory is a big rock. It's something you commit to and schedule when you plan your week. By winning the daily private victory, you will enable yourself to live all of the 7 habits and become truly effective. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People Foundations represents a shift from taking the 7 habits to really living the 7 habits. The work session is just the beginning of the 7 habits process, which includes a 21-day contract, the Living the 7 Habits app, and the 9 summary cards. The work session introduces your participants to the concepts and practices of the 7 habits, setting them up for a life practice of effective living. You can then use the cards in team meetings to remember and reinforce the contract. Use the app to finish your mission statement, to do your weekly planning, and to be reminded of key ideas from the program. Work the 21-day contract to turn these practices into lifelong habits. You will love facilitating this content. Watch as it enriches the lives of those you teach and as it changes your life too. Enjoy.